Welcome back, everybody. This is Modern Randy. I am Randy, and today we're talking about Death Shadow, a deck that has waxed and waned over popularity over the last few years, and has recently put up a couple numbers. Recently been getting played. And I thought I'd kind of go over it, talk about the numbers that it's been playing, and kind of break down the deck and essentially what it's doing. As always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, you like what I'm doing, go ahead and give a like on the video, subscribe to the channel to keep up with everything that's going on. And let me know what you guys expect to see in your RCQs and what you're going to be taking. Love to hear from you guys. But today, breaking down Death Shadow essentially is a 1 mana 13/13 creature. Sounds super powerful. It does get -X, though, where X is your life total. So essentially, if you are at 20 life, it gets -20 and dies immediately when you cast it, and so on. So you need to be, below 13 life to make this creature playable, essentially. So how are we doing that? Well, first off, we're playing 9 different fetch lands, as well as the four full watery graves. We want to be fetch shocking ourselves a lot to get our life total down. We're playing 1 Otawara as a utility land, 2 islands, 1 underground, undercity sewers, not underground. Much more expensive card. Undercity Sewers as our surveil land, and then we're also playing Sink into Super and Vulgar Trawler as kind of additional lands, as well as spells that we can play. So obviously Trawler is good. We'll exile graveyards in the main deck. Nice little extra little help, and then Super obviously being able to bounce target spell or not land permanent to opponent controls to their owner's hand, being able to kind of put your opponent on the back foot as like another additional kind of like pseudo counter spell type thing. Very nice to have. Also, if you do put them into play untapped as lands, it is 3 damage for each one. So that does do a lot of damage to get us, closer to being sub 13 total life total. We also are playing 4 Preordain, 4 Consider as kind of our card selection, card draw spells, along with 4 Thoughtseize to interact with our opponent, make sure they're not doing anything too broken. Notably, that also makes us lose 2 life. Once again, helps get our Death Shadow into range of being able to be played. Obviously, we're playing 4 Death Shadow. You're not going to call the deck Death Shadow without playing 4 of them. Playing 2 Psychic Frog. Card has been kind of a menace and been taking over all the blue-black decks that are running around. Being able to draw a card whenever you deal damage with it, being able to discard cards that we're not using, extra lands, counter spells that are dead, removal spells that are dead, whatever, to make them bigger, and then being able to give them flying by exiling cards from a graveyard. Notably, the exiling cards from a graveyard does work as a cute combination with Murktide Regent, so we already have a Murktide Regent in on the field, and we exile like 2 lands and a Thoughtseize from our graveyard. This will get, +1/+1 counter because whenever an instant sorcery leaves your graveyard, put a counter on it. So it does help grow our Murktide Regent as well. Orcust Millmaster, card's great. Between Mardu and Boros energy decks running around, there's a bunch of X1s running around that you can kill. Same thing goes with the ring decks. It just helps against them, being able to deal more damage to them, push damage in. Just kind of a great little card. Not too much else to say about that. 2 Street Race here, basically just for cycling to help fill our graveyard. For Psychic Frog, Murktide Regent, as well as it does cost 2 life to cycle instead of any mana. So that way we can get lower to be able to play our Death Shadow earlier. 3 Murktide Regents, we have our graveyard getting filled up with spells. Great way to put out, a 8/8, 7/7, 6/6 Murktide Regent. Just great card overall, harder to kill. Makes sense why this is seeing play. We're playing 4 Fatal Push, 2 Dismembers, and 3 Drowning Lock as our removal spells, essentially. Fatal Push, great card. Don't have to talk too much about that. Dismember, great card when we're trying to lose life anyway. Helps get our Death Shadow bigger, makes it be able to get played faster, things like that. Dress Down does pseudo combo with Death Shadow as well, especially early on. So say you're at 10 life total, you have a 3/3 Death Shadow, you go to attack into your opponent, they say no blocks. Before damage, you flash in Dress Down. Now Death Shadow is a 13/13. That is a big swing of damage. Not to mention there are like the creatures running around we want to turn off, helps turn off Nadu, helps turn off a bunch of the other creatures, things like that. It makes sense why Dress Down is seeing play as a one of. It's not super relevant with the Dress Down Death Shadow combo, but it is something to look out for, especially if you're going to be picking up this deck and trying it out. Then obviously we're running 4 counter spells because we are blue black. Makes sense. Drown Lock is another counter spell / removal spell, and 2 Stubborn Denials here just as an extra way to have interaction, especially early on. There's a lot of times when you can just force spike your opponent and get a good counter spell off of that. Same thing with our Psychic Frog, Riptide Regent, Death Shadow. All of these creatures are theoretically going to eventually get big and be 4 power or greater. Essentially, Orcust Bowmasters are only creatures that we don't ever expect to get big in this deck. So makes sense. Just an extra removal or extra counter spell early on. I could easily see you changing Stubborn Denial into Spell Pierce as well. The person whose list I stole from a challenge, it was just playing Stubborn Denial. I kind of think Spell Pierce is probably better overall, just because you don't have that conditional. Obviously, the conditional is great when Spell Pierce would be, oh, I'll pay the extra 2 mana. It's like, oh, if I had Stubborn Denial here, it would have been a counter spell. But I think Spell Pierce is probably better early on in the early turns of the game as a whole. Also, I would probably change and go up to 4 Bowmasters. I think Bowmasters is really well positioned right now. It's something you want to have in your deck. But other than that, this is kind of the deck that's been running around. Obviously, these numbers have to change, waxed, waned. If you ever played Death Shadow, or if you played Death Shadow in the past, you know that anybody who plays Death Shadow wants to think they're 5-head because they will change 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers of cards and go, obviously I have the superior build. I am better at Magic than everybody else. That being said, this deck always changes. The only thing that kind of stays constant with Death Shadow is 4 Thoughtseize for sure, usually 4 Preordain, 4 counter spells, and then either some number of Drowning Locks, 4 Fatal Push is usually the same, and then every other number changes. So it's all just dependent on what you think the meta is going to be, what you're expecting, what you think you're weak against, what you're not weak against. Insert about 400 different variables, and then you have your answer of the perfect Death Shadow deck to build. But moving on to the sideboard here, makes sense kind of with the sideboard once you see it. So we have 2 Consign to Memory, 100% there for the Tron matchup, things like that. Same thing with the 3 Break the Ice. Tron is kind of a struggle bus matchup for this deck, where Eldrazi, insert whatever you want to call it, because there's about 13 different Eldrazi, Tron, just Eldrazi decks, just Tron decks running around. So whatever you want to call them, whatever you want to say. All the decks are playing lands that produce colorless mana. That's what your Break the Ice and Consign to Memories are here for. We have Stern Scalding as more removal spells for like the Grief Scams type of effect, things like that. Along with a bunch of little creature decks running around. We have 1 Toxic Deluge as our way to kind of board wipe our opponents. We have 2 Spell Bombs and 2 Surgical Extraction for the Graveyard and Reanimator strategies. 2 Flusterstorms here for the Storm matchup, and 1 Tasha's Tidebinder here is just kind of a catch-all, help turn off rings, things like that. Just a nice little catch-all. Here's our 15th slot. But this is essentially Death Shadow in a nutshell. Give or take about 10 cards, depending on what you think you're going to see, what you think is going to happen, what you're expecting, what you think is better, what you think is worse. Overall, I'm really a big fan of this deck. I've played this deck a lot. I had one of my friends who was on this deck probably since its inception, all the way up until it was not, all the way up until basically the Lure Span. This man was playing Death Shadow, so he had put a lot of time and effort into it. I know he's a big fan of this list, or a big fan of this deck, and I think he's trying to figure out how to make it playable again for the RCQ season, so he can play his foil Death Shadows once again. But deck is looking good, looking strong. I'm interested to see how this deck kind of shakes out into the meta, especially once we see Nadu get the axe. As always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, like what I'm doing, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, keep up with everything I'm doing. Let me know what you think you're going to see in the RCQs, what you're taking to the RCQs. Love to hear from you. I'll catch you guys next time.